Okay. Okay, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. If we can go ahead and everyone stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome, everyone, to tonight's meeting, even in this crazy kind of stormy weather. If we can go ahead and do roll call.
David Shuey.
Rick Dreyer.
Julie Johnson.
Kathy Jericho.
Fred Townsend, Town Solicitor.
Dawn Hanks, building official.
Bill Zoll for town manager.
Thank you. So the four of us on the committee are the committee, because we had someone, Phil Davenport resigned, so it's just the four of us at this point. So we're going to recruit for future membership on the committee. But for tonight, it's what you see is what you get. I hope all the members have had an opportunity to look at the agenda. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda? Anyone?
I have a motion to adopt the agenda.
Thank you. Second?
Or second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 And as we're aware, basically the agenda is pretty much related to the request for variance for one particular property. There are many variances. I spoke with our town solicitor earlier. It's a lot of information. There's going to be a lot of conversation. I'm sure there's public comment that I expect. If the board feels like they need time to consider any of these variances after tonight, we don't necessarily have to vote on it tonight. I'm not saying we won't. I'm just putting it out there that it's a lot of information. There's a lot of stuff going on here. So there are a lot of moving parts. I don't want to, anyone to think that we absolutely are going to vote tonight. The agenda says, discuss and possibly vote. So I just want to put it out there. Again, not saying either way. I just want to put it out there that there's a lot of information, a lot of things to digest. And we're going to hear from the presenter, as well as I've gotten some through the town. I've gotten some public comment. I know there's already somebody in the waiting room for public comment. So I just want to just put that out there to begin the night. I don't want, there be any false expectations of where we're going tonight. So on that note, do any committee members have anything they would like to say as far as updates or announcements before we get started? Okay, so at this point, we're going to go ahead and open the public hearing. I'll go ahead and have you represent, and just please state your name for the record. And
thank you, Madam Chairperson. My name is Glenn Mandalis. I'm an attorney with Baird Mandalis Brockstead. We have offices at 1413 Savannah Road, closest to Dewey in Lewis. I represent More Blue Water LLC. They're the owner of the property that we're going to be discussing tonight. With me this evening is Jeff Sholkoff. He's an architect with the design group, and he's got about 35 years of experience in both Maryland and Delaware doing these sorts of projects. As I mentioned, before I was mentioning to Kate that I'm glad that I'm not here asking for a variance from some stormwater management requirement, because this would be the wrong night to be asking for that variance. So the client is the owner of the Bay Resort located at 126 Bellevue Street. As you know, it's located on the Rehoboth Bay between Bellevue and Dagsworthy. It's in the Resort Business 3 zoning district. We're here seeking variances and a special exception outlined in our application. If granted, the variances and the special exception requested would facilitate certain renovations and additions to the Bay Resort. The property presently looks a little tired. I'm sure you've all seen it. And this project is really intended to reboot it and give us some new design features that will enhance guest experiences and kind of keep in pace with the quality of life and the quality of projects that Dewey Beach has experienced over the last several years. So with that, Kate, if you would, could I show, there, you got them up already. So these are some existing photos of what the property looks like right now. This is the front part of it. Kate, if you go to the next one. This is to the rear of the property now, looking at the bay. If you look in the foreground there, there's a gazebo. That will be one of the subjects that we talk about tonight. That gazebo is proposed to be moved to the other side of the bay side of the property. Next one, please. And there's just a closer shot of that gazebo. Here's the outdoor pool. This is a relevant photo because we have a proposal to enclose this pool so that it becomes an interior pool. One thing to focus on in this shot is that the hard surfacing around the pool, the enclosure we propose encloses that hardscaping, but we don't propose to go any further into a setback than that hardscaping already goes. So we're not proposing to expand horizontally, just vertically to enclose that pool area, and it'll be an indoor experience for the guests. Next one. This is the rear of the property. One thing to orient yourselves to here is that first floor level, there's sort of outdoor porches there. We're proposing a row of cabanas along that entire first floor. The cabana is sort of a fancy word for what's going to be a porch extension. The only variance needed is for the absolute last one. There's 12 of them proposed in this renovation. The last one slightly is in the front yard setback, so we're asking for variances for that one. It helps visually and otherwise. Next one. Here's another shot of that outdoor pool. It gives a better representation of where the enclosure would exist, sort of right where that fence is. Next shot. And here's just some nighttime photos of, that's the main entrance to the Bay Resort. And that's just another shot of the front of the property. And I think that's it. Can we go then to the renderings? I'd like to show what we're trying to create with this project and what these variances we've requested will facilitate. Now let's go to it. In the application, there's a bunch of renderings, the color renderings. Not that one. I think you showed me a PowerPoint that you had of, or maybe not. It's the, here, there you go. So if you go to the meeting, it would be, if you go to, yep.
Yeah.
So if you scroll down through that, keep going, and here they are. So this is what we're trying to create at the Bay Resort. Some things you see in the front of the property here, there are some angled roof lines. Those roof lines do not exceed the height limitation, so we're not asking for variances in that respect, other than right in the main entrance area, we're proposing to change out the stairway to turn into an elevator to help with ADA and other just guest experiences. And that angled roof or bulkhead above the elevator, there's a special exception allowance within the code, and we'll be asking for that tonight to be able to go 42 inches above the roof line. Thank you. Here's just another shot of the main entrance. This one I thought was interesting to show you kind of the embellishments we're doing at the main entrance to the building itself. That top balcony doesn't exist right now. We don't need a variance or any special exceptions to create that, but I wanted to show you sort of what we're trying to create. Next one. This is just inside the lobby. Next one. That's just a closer one. So here is that indoor pool that would become an indoor pool if the variance for the enclosure is granted. Next one will show it, I think, a little bit better. One thing to look at on this photo probably is if you look beyond the windows at the kind of the rear of this view, there's some outdoor decking that is also part of this application. A very small portion of that decking is in this rear yard setback, and I'll show that to you a little bit later. Next one. There's another shot of the indoor pool, and if you look in the back, you can see that decking a little bit better now. Next. This is just sort of an aerial of that deck landing on the front of the property. Next. Just an overall again of the front. Next one. Here's the rear of the property. or actually it's a side yard technically, but it's the portion of the property that faces the bay. The swimming pool there is a proposed new outdoor swimming pool that is subject to our application this evening, and I'll talk about why we may or may not need a variance for that swimming pool. Okay, can you go back up there? This one showed as well. This one's, so you can see the gazebo on the left-hand side. That's the relocated location of the gazebo. Next one. This is just an aerial kind of showing everything. You can see maybe a little bit better view there of the pool enclosure on the right-hand side of the screen and the decking. Then you can see I talked about the row of cabanas at that first floor and facing the bay. You can see the placement of the gazebo. You can see the placement of the swimming pool. Next. Just a little bit closer shot. Next one. And that kind of shows the whole property as well. If you don't mind scrolling back, Kate, I'm going to leave one of them up. The next one. Yeah, let's just leave it on that one for now. So that's kind of an overview of the property and what we're trying to create. I will say, anybody, please interrupt if you have questions as we're going. I'm going to go through each of the variances that we're requesting. So we'll do them one by one. But if you have questions, do not hesitate to stop me. I want to make sure what's important to you is more important to me than what I want to tell you. So any questions, let me know.
We'll go to public comment after the presentation. We'll
But
open it.
before the deliberation takes place,
Yes.
we're going to hear from the public.
So there is, of course, a legal standard that the Board of Adjustment will be applying as you review these variances. I will not bore you with it. I'll give you a little bit of a condensed version because it was all in the written materials. I'm sure you've read all that. So the standard to be applied for these sorts of variances, these area variances, is the exceptional practical difficulty standard. And that standard was announced and at least discussed in the Board of Adjustment of Newcastle versus Quick Check Realty case, the Delaware Supreme Court case. And the Supreme Court explained the exceptional practical difficulty test this way. It said, such exceptional practical difficulty is present where the requested dimensional change is minimal and the harm to the applicant, if the variance is denied, will be greater than the probable effect on the neighboring properties if the variance is granted. So it's a little bit of a balancing test. What is the harm to the applicant if the variance is not granted versus the harm to the surrounding neighbors if the variance is granted? Sort of a balance. The board or the Supreme Court also said when you're doing this analysis, there are 4 factors that should be considered. First, the nature of the zone in which the property lies. As I mentioned, we're in our RB Resort Business 3 district here. Second, the character of the immediate vicinity and the uses contained therein. Third, whether if the restriction upon the applicant's property were removed, such removal would seriously affect such neighboring property and uses. And then finally, whether if the restriction is not removed, the restriction would create hardship for the owner in relation to his efforts to make normal improvements in the character of that use of the property, which is a permitted use under the use provisions of the ordinance. And the hotel use was a permitted use when it was approved and built. So the current application, we believe, satisfies that legal standard. And so you might ask, well, what is the exceptional practical difficulty that you are experiencing with this property? The exceptional practical difficulty associated with the property really arises from the fact that the structure was built shortly after zoning was implemented in Dewey Beach back in the 80s. There's a whole story about what was there, and there was a fire. But in the 80s, zoning was implemented, and while those zoning regulations have changed dramatically over the intervening 40 years, the building is exactly as it was built then. So as the zoning regulations changed and setbacks changed and were amended, the building became what's termed illegally non-conforming. It doesn't conform to current building or to current zoning requirements, but it's legal because it did when it was built. So that's what makes it difficult to make normal improvements to the building. So that is our exceptionally impractical difficulty, is that the building was built in a way that is no longer consistent with zoning regs. So if we could, Kate, go to that rudimentary kind of aerial view, that one. Yep, that's the one. So here we are looking at the variances that are, and special exceptions that are requested. You can see that one cabana up top on the face of the building that faces the bay. You can see the gazebo that's relocated from sort of the lower left-hand section of the screen to now what is the more northerly location. You can see the location of the new outdoor pool, the location of that elevator bulkhead, and then finally the pool enclosure and decking. And if you'll look to Bellevue Street, you'll see there's a dotted line there that says front. I should mention that nothing here is to scale, but I wanted you to have a flavor for, there's front yard, rear yard setbacks, and side yard setbacks. This particular property, the front yard setback is measured from the property line that is along Bellevue Street. The rear property line is measured along Dagsworthy Street, and the side property lines are to the bay, and then to, I always forget the name of that, Rainbow Cove, right? So those are the different variances, and I'd like to just launch into talking about each of them individually, unless you have questions at this point.
Anyone?
Great. So let's first talk about the pool enclosure and decking. So what we're requesting is a rear yard setback variance to permit the proposed pool enclosure and multi-level deck structure to extend 7 feet into the 10.
Wait, hang
Yep.
on 1 second. Dave, you have a question?
Sure.
I do have a question before we get into the rear yard setback. I looked at 185-49A
Mhm.
and it reads, on through lots, the required front yard shall be provided on each street. So I'm assuming that what you're characterizing as the rear yard is actually the front yard setback on Dagsworthy Street.
That's I didn't see that, but I presumed through this process that the Dagsworthy Street was a rear yard setback of 10 feet rather than a front yard setback of 18 feet. Is the way I've looked at it. And
Well, yeah, it says a through lot and required front yard shall be provided on each street. So your property does extend from one street to the next, correct?
it does.
Dawn, I think you had, can you clarify that? I saw you shaking your head.
In the respect that whenever a property does border a bay, the ocean and so forth, and it's like a somewhat of a corner, then they have a choice of being able to figure out which one they want as to be the front yard. That particular code, I did not in any way, shape, or form look at in application to this property. It may apply, I don't know. I really can't answer to that at this moment. In our discussion with Glenn and Jeff, it was the front yard was Bellevue, Dagsworthy was the rear yard, and east to west were considered the sides.
And perhaps, Jeff, are you able to comment on, I know Dagsworthy has a decent sized right of way, but is there some land between Dagsworthy Street and the actual property line of the property? Because at one point we were talking about
Large right of way.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
you're going to need to come up to the
Yeah.
podium to answer that question so that they can see you online. And if you can just state your name.
I'm Jeff Schulthoff, architect.
And sir, before you answer that, I'm going to need to ask you to confirm that the testimony you give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes. There's a particularly large right of way, I think, that's held by the state, but maintained by the town, as far as how I understand it goes.
And
And-
I'm sorry, you're pointing, but that screen is not facing us. So can you
So
tell us what you're,
So between.
Here, I'll tell you
Dags-
what, let me
Yeah.
point and you talk. I'll go over
Okay.
here.
sorry, just want to make sure that we're all clear about what we're all talking about.
Okay, so between Dagsworthy
I'm good.
and the property, I don't believe there is I believe there's a right of way that DPNL has with the power lines that run down the street. I don't believe that there is an intervening property.
Thank you. Sorry, with us, some people watching on Zoom, it's, we
No,
had to make sure that everybody's.
Yep, thanks. So I'm going to treat this as we have throughout the whole process as that being a rear lot setback. There might be something we need to look at as far as the through lot.
Can I just ask one more question while we have this up?
Sure.
And that, in terms of the properties that are to the east,
Mhm.
your building, the existing building is, I don't know, it already extends further south than those properties. It appears from this drawing, photograph.
Marginally, if it does, sure.
And what you're proposing, would it extend further than south? You said that you want to go 7 feet into a 10-foot rear yard setback. If it's a front yard setback, that would be 15 feet of a,
Right,
right,
that's correct. That's right.
18-foot setback.
So the hardscaping around it pretty much lines with in fact, maybe we should go back and look at the rendering. Would the rendering show it perhaps?
Show the neighboring.
Whoops, come on, Jeff.
Okay, if I stand up here.
I think because we know your voice now, but you need to be at a mic,
Will that
maybe
one pick 'em up?
borrow,
Yeah, we need to record your comments.
yeah. Just, yeah, talking to the mic. We know your voice now, so. But yeah, if you can just talk into the mic, Jeff, if you can talk into the mic so like the people watching.
Roughly, I believe that the enclosure will be in line with the porches that are in the neighboring houses. I can't say that we've done a formal study of that, but if I line that up, go across there, it's about in the same line as the neighboring structures.
David, did that answer your question? Sort of.
So in this instance, it's our view that the harm to the applicant if the variance is denied will be greater than the probable effect on the neighboring properties if the variance is granted. And here's why. First, pools and decks are permitted in the RB3 zoning district. So there's not a question as to whether this pool or the decking can exist. But the presently existing outdoor pool that we'd like to enclose is again located along Dagsworthy. And to the extent there's any noise that emanates from the pool, it would, probably emanate across Dagsworthy into that residential area. If anything, enclosing this pool structure would enhance the quality of life across the street versus working some detriment across the street in the residential neighborhoods. Additionally, the distance from what was the edge of pavement of Dagsworthy just before the recent paving of the parking area, the edge of pavement is about 30 feet to what would be the most northerly portion of the pool enclosure. So there's still quite a bit of distance, even though, so to explain the point about 7 feet into the 10-foot setback, that's a fact. The 7 feet into the 10-foot setback is what's requested, but there's still an additional 20 some feet before you would have gotten to what was the edge of pavement in Dagsworthy Street. So although it sounds significant, it's really not given the unique circumstances of the placement or the configuration of this lot. So it's our view that if anything, enclosing this, and I guess I should mention that having it set back that far off of Dagsworthy, it wouldn't create any sort of an imposing kind of structure as you look across or as people across Dagsworthy Street view the Bay Resort Hotel.
Mandalis, could you speak to the material that would be used to encompass or enclose the pool? I think you may have mentioned that earlier.
It would be clear. Actually, I should probably have the engineer or the architect speak to it.
Yes, as envisioned now, it would be a wall that's about 50% glass and about 50% probably fiber cement, hardy plank type material.
Thank you.
So that's what I have on the pool enclosure and decking. Sure,
The decking will not be.
that's correct. It'll be,
And that's more than one level of decking? So you're rendering it.
there's the ground level. So it's a 3-floor hotel structure. So each floor will have decking on it. So there'll be ground level, a first level, and a second level. That's good.
The area of decking on each level is about 400 square feet. It's on the top floor On the second floor, it's about 300 square feet. On the top floor, it's about 400 square feet. The part of the idea of the decking is it's part of a stairwell system. Because we're adding an elevator to improve the handicap, we needed another stairwell. So that was a good location because it was at the end of the hall. So it's a good fire safety thing. It's also a convenient way to get to the beach.
Anything else on the pool decking? Or the pool and the pool enclosure and deck?
Dawn?
In talking about the existing pool and the decking that goes all the way south to Daxworthy Street, what has taken place in the past is that the pattern of development has been with past building officials and so forth, that anything that is ground level, like a patio and so forth, is allowed to go up to the property line. So no doubt that was taken into consideration when that was built way back when. So that's why most likely
So
what
the
we've got it today.
decking on the first floor is kind of in line, but not necessarily the second or the third floor with the enclosure.
Yes,
Okay.
that would be correct. But
I just want to clarify. I just want to make sure I'm understanding everything.
the concrete around the existing pool is ground level.
Right.
And so anything that has been done in the past and allowed 12 inches and under has been considered by Dewey and past building officials as ground level. And so it could automatically go up to the property line. Sussex County is 6 inches and below.
If I might clarify, both the deck and the pool enclosure are 3 feet setback from that existing property line. So it's kind of impact less than what the ground level deck does.
That spark any other questions for anyone? Before we move on? Dave, you
I am.
had a sigh.
Taking notes.
Okay, I'm trying to take John's comment. So right now, the paved patio or the whatever, the pool and decking that already goes into what would be whatever setback it is, front or rear yard setback by 7 or 17, or 15 feet.
Yeah, however, it's existing currently was apparently approved when it was built. And it appears to go very close to the property line, the boundary line. I haven't been out to measure it by any means, but it appears to be that way.
If you've been out there, there's a fence along that whole
Mhm.
side. And the fence appears to be, and is on the survey, right on the property line.
Mhm.
And the deck goes right to the fence. So it might be off by like the dimension of the fence, but I think it's very close to the property line.
This outside, the proposal that is not suggest going beyond that.
No, actually it goes, it's less by 3 feet.
3
It
feet.
stays 3 feet
Okay.
inside of the fence.
Yeah, I might have confused you earlier when I showed the fence and said this is about where the enclosure would be. That's right. It's actually 3 feet closer to the structure.
There was some other part of the code. I think it was a little misled. I was not misled. I was misunderstood. And Dawn and I talked about it. There's a part that says pool enclosures,
Mhm.
pool accessory structures may be within 3 feet, are allowed, but have to be 3 feet from the property line. And I took the accessory structure as meaning the enclosure. But that's what's stuck in the design and why we're here for the request.
This is why I said there's a lot to digest in this request. So go ahead.
Okay, so the next one I'd like to
I'm
move
sorry,
on to
unless
if
anyone
we're
else-
done.
Sorry, did you ask? Okay, go ahead.
So what I'd like to move on to next, since we're on the subject of pools, let's talk for a moment about the outdoor pool. We've characterized this as both an appeal of the decision of the building official and a variance if the appeal isn't granted. So Don and I just have an teensy disagreement on what one of the code sections says. So this is section, so first addressing the appeal. Section 185-51, which is titled Accessory Buildings and Structures, subsection B, says the following. Accessory swimming pools, open and unenclosed, may occupy a required yard or side yard, provided they are not located closer than 10 feet to an interior or side lot line. And then it goes on to say some of the things that are not applicable here, and I'll read it all in a moment, but I wanted to explain step by step. So this pool is proposed to be in a side yard setback, 4 feet into the 10 yard, or 4 feet into the 10-foot side yard setback, and that's the side yard that faces the bay. So again, it says accessory swimming pools. This is a pool that's accessory to the main hotel use. Open and unenclosed, which this will be open and unenclosed, may occupy a required yard or side yard. And here we're occupying a required side yard by 4 feet, by going 4 feet into the 10-foot side yard. But then it says, provided they are not located closer than 10 feet to an interior side lot line. So you can go into the side yard, but you can't be closer than 10 feet to an interior side lot line. And what I want to show you is that the word interior is important there, because an interior side lot line, certainly the side lot line to the east where Seabreeze is, Rainbow Breeze is, that certainly is an interior side lot line. And I think what this code section is trying to do is protect against, if you have a neighbor on your side lot line, you don't want a pool that goes into the side yard closer than 10 feet. But if you're on the other side, where you're on an exterior side lot line, where the bay is, where there isn't another property that you're going to affect or somehow exercise a detriment to their quality of life by putting a pool closer into that side yard line, this code provision, it's our view that this code provision allows for the pool to be in that side lot setback without need for a variance. So the first thing I'm asking you to do is render an opinion as to whether which interpretation of that code section is correct. Are we able to proceed with this pool as it's presented without a variance because this code section allows it to exist where we show it within that side yard setback, because it's not an interior side lot line, rather it's an exterior side lot line? Or on the other hand, am I misreading this code section and we're still required to be at least 10 feet from a side lot line, which would mean we'd need a variance of 4 feet into that 10-foot side lot line? So that's a question for you when you're deliberating. That's the first question I think you're going to have to answer as it relates to the outdoor pool, is on an appeal, which interpretation is correct? Because if the interpretation that I just proposed to you is correct, we would not need a variance for this outdoor pool.
And again,
Yeah. I
I'm
was
sorry.
just gonna ask you.
well,
Your
if
thoughts?
if your interpretation is correct, is there a setback applicable to the pool at all? I think you mentioned that is it 3 feet or?
There is not, if what we're saying is correct.
Okay.
We've chosen to have it 4 feet off the side lot line. Jeff, it looks like there's something you want to add.
So that clarify, because I think no one has enlightened me that the county has a regulation about being 6 feet from a property line that might have to do with safety around a pool. That's not a zoning regulation. So I don't think that's an issue before you guys right now, but it's why we're still 6 feet.
That's right. I'd forgotten that. Thanks.
Ron, do you have anything? Thank you.
When it comes to the county, many times they do give us, being Dewey, guidelines. However, we still do have our own code and so forth. And so Dewey has chosen to have it stating that pools, because they're a structure, that they're no closer than 10 feet to an interior side lot line, just how Glenn read it there, or 6 feet to a rear lot line.
Right.
So they do give parameters.
Mhm.
And so with this, in my researching of the code, it appears that I can find no definition that helps us to clarify 10 feet to an interior side lot line. What is an interior side lot line? I don't find it anywhere in the code whatsoever. And so as a result, with setbacks, they're like boundaries and so forth. And the word setback in our code has a front setback, a rear setback, and sides. So it does identify the surrounding boundary area of a lot or a parcel. But our code does not give a clear definition and so forth. And since there does not appear to be any prior cases like this one,
Right.
there's not been any pattern of development. So as a building official, I had to say, well, you gotta talk to you all.
Right.
Well, so I get that. So it's the difference because since one side is on the bay where there's no
Yes.
other property owners, it's different. It potentially is different from the side setback where you've got neighboring properties. So, okay, that makes sense. I'm
sorry.
but you're right. There's no precedent to make that determination.
There hasn't been. However, this is something for everyone to consider. In our definitions, under a lot, it states a fractional portion of a subdivision measured, surveyed, and plotted, and set apart for separate use and occupancy from contiguous parcels of land and having its principal frontage upon a street. So that definition does talk about contiguous land as well. So since our code does not give any sort of definitive answer to this particular situation.
This is why I just resigned from the Charter and Code Review Committee because I was like, it's
Welcome
way over
back.
my head. Well, not over my head, but I'm just way too busy with my real job that I could not
Sure.
be on a fourth committee. And this is part of the reason why, because there's a lot of information to digest and figure
There's,
out.
in this one particularly, there's a lot. The response I would have is that, you know, I would look to canons of statutory construction. When you don't know what the statute is trying to say, the courts have developed certain canons of statutory construction. And one of the canons they've said is that you have to read meaning into every word. Words should not be superfluous. So the only meaning I could give to that word interior is that that's a side lot line that abuts another property is an interior side lot line. One that is the terminating property or the terminating side lot line must not be an interior one. It must be the exterior. And that's why I gave that meaning to this code provision. But
Before you move on,
sure.
anyone have any questions about that before we move on?
Where does this pool jut out? I mean, what's here? Exactly. What is
So
Do you
the
wanna go to the
exterior
rendering?
one
yeah,
over there.
on the exterior?
Sure. May we go back to the rendering?
And yeah,
There we
there
go.
it is.
So face,
That's the bay on the left.
right.
So
Right.
just to clarify here, the property line is where the fence is showing in this rendering. The beach is technically in I guess it's state land, state. It floods once it inundates and tides, it
Right.
comes and goes, but the property line is actually where the fence is shown, where the people are standing in the image there. So the 6-foot requested setback here is from that fence to the edge of the pool.
David,
Again, just the fence is part of this proposal. Is that required as a safety issue for the pool or?
It is required as a safety issue. Mhm. So I want to stay on the pool for a minute because in the event that you don't accept our interpretation of that code section and don't grant the appeal, we're still requesting a variance then because it'll extend 4 feet into the side yard setback. And again, we feel as though the harm to the applicant if the variance is denied is greater than the probable effect on neighboring properties if the variance is granted. And as I mentioned earlier, pools are permitted in the RB3 zoning district. The point to make here, I think, is that, to the extent the outdoor pool was located on or would have been located on Dagsworthy and then hopefully becomes enclosed, we're moving the pool now to what I think is the outdoor pool to what is the most responsible location on the property when you look at it from the perspective of what effect will it have on neighboring properties. This is now to the bay, probably the furthest location from any of the residential properties that we could locate it. and just seems to make sense there. So I don't think that it'll work a detriment to neighboring properties. But, you know, a resort hotel, there's an expectation that you're going to have some sort of outdoor pool. This enhances the experience. So it certainly work more of a harm to my client if the variance is not granted. Are there questions on that outdoor? Any other questions on the outdoor pool?
What are the hours of operation on the outdoor?
Have we had any client conversations with that? I'm sorry, the client's not here participating tonight, and I don't know the answer to that, but I'm happy to get it for you. Or of course, the variance, I guess, could be granted with some sort of condition that would limit hours. I want to move on now to the cabanas, or what we affectionately call the porches extensions. So this rendering shows them again. They're at that first level on the face that looks at the bay. We're requesting their front yard setback variance to permit the cabana to extend 6 feet into the 18-foot front yard setback. But remember, it's only for that final cabana to the north of the property. There's 12 of them there. Yep, just that one on the end.
So basically you can do for the other 11, it's just the last one to make it uniform.
That's right. That's right. As I mentioned earlier, that the building has become out of conformity with zoning laws. That portion of the building actually sits now in the front yard setback. So to have that last cabana, it would also extend into the front yard setback by 6 feet, and we're requesting a variance for it to be able to do that. We don't think that.
I'm sorry, just to be devil
Sure.
what's the hardship to not have them all uniform?
So again, the hardship is a little bit higher standard than area variances, which is the exceptional practical difficulty standard. And the exceptional practical, the hardship standard is sometimes difficult to meet. The courts have said it's a higher standard because it relates to use variances. Area variances are exceptional practical difficulty. And again, you go back to the balancing test. The Supreme Court said, what's the harm to the applicant versus the harm to the neighbors? And here, I think what happens is when you're coming toward the building on Bayard and then making the turn onto Bellevue, that might be the only place you'll be able to view that cabana from. It's still well over 100 feet from any residential property. It's on the portion of the property that looks toward the bay. But of course, it's ending with 11 cabanas rather than 12 would be visually distracting, of course, and just wouldn't provide any benefit to the surrounding areas. The only thing it would do is sort of harm my client in that the visual distraction. We wouldn't be able to provide that experience for that last room, while working no real benefit to the surrounding community if you left it off.
Okay.
Any questions? Yeah.
Can you talk? Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
So you showed a picture earlier of those areas as it currently are constructed. These cabanas are going to be an extension of those areas where we saw the one gentleman sitting.
That's right. If you scroll back,
what are
Kate,
the
I think you can see-
dimensions of the extension?
Sure,
How
if you have
far
that.
is that?
Each one is the width of the room, which is about 12 feet by about 5 feet deep. So each of these so-called cabanas are 5 feet extended out. So they take the porch from being a 5-foot by 11-foot porch to being a 10-foot by 11-foot porch
So
for just those ground floor units.
So the 13th or the 12th, whichever it was, unit, the one furthest on the left.
Yes.
The encroachment into the setback is going to be
About 6 feet,
6 feet, and it's going to be.
but it's not any farther
It's going
than
to
the
be 5
existing.
feet wide.
Yes,
Mhm.
right. And it's it's not extending any further into the setback than the edge of the existing building.
And is it a solid wall on that?
No,
end?
all of those are just 4 posters. They're just 4 posts with a trellis. They're more or less like a pergola, I guess you might call it.
Okay. So it's not a solid wall extending off the existing building in the front yard setback. It's just a.
Be open. There's a little bit of lattice screen rendered in the renderings here. In this case, it probably would be open. The lattice screen is intended to provide privacy between porches. Wouldn't need to be there on that end.
Got it.
So this is the first floor and you rent the first floor and they have the cabana.
Correct. Yep, that's right.
Do we have a better picture of that? That one's kind of.
No, I think it's the other direction.
Mhm.
Am I right?
I think the one that you had up there.
Go one more.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Pretty
okay.
much shows it.
Okay.
So there's like a gray area, which is like the ceiling or the roof of
Right.
the cabana.
Okay, yeah,
Probably like a
now I
square.
can tell. Yep,
Okay.
Mhm.
no, I see that one. Okay.
Any other questions on that single cabana?
David, any questions?
Just looking at it.
Okay,
But basically what you're saying is there are 12 rooms along that.
Correct.
but the variance only applies to the 12th room. Because everything else is within there.
Right.
Questions?
No,
No, you're good.
no,
Okay.
So-
Okay,
So I'd like to move on now to a variance we've requested for relief from the freeboard requirement. And this one does get a little bit technical, so I'm sure we'll have a little bit of a discussion on it. So in addition to zoning code variances, this board's authorized to grant variances from the town's flood damage reduction code. The existing hotel is in an AE flood zone. And FEMA has said the base flood elevation in an AE flood zone is 6 feet. So FEMA has said, elevate your structures 6 feet if you're in an AE flood zone. The town has added to that an additional 12 inches of what's called freeboard. So elevate to 7 feet. Our existing elevation is at 6.4 feet. And I've submitted the flood elevation certificate. If you'd like to see it, we can look at it here, but it's at 6.4 feet. That was a 2018 certification. So we are about 4.5 inches above the FEMA required base flood elevation. We are about 7.5 inches below the town's freeboard requirement. So if that makes sense, we're above what FEMA says you have to be at. The town has said, let's do a little bit better, get 12 additional inches up. So we're in between those two. We're above FEMA by 4.5 inches, below freeboard by 7.5 inches. So what we're asking for is relief from the 7.5 inches of freeboard is what we're asking for relief from. I guess you could say we have about 4.5 inches of freeboard. We would need 7.5 more. There are.
Why do you need that?
Well, so.
I mean,
Mhm.
you're not constructing, you're not demolishing the structure. Where do you only need it in portions of the development? Or do you
No,
need-
so what kicks in is there's a requirement within the code that if additions and renovations are valued at greater than 50% of the value of the existing structure, then you have to come into compliance with all of the town's flood damage reduction code. So if these variances were instead granted, we wouldn't. So we're not sure, to be honest with you, whether we're going to exceed that 50% threshold or not. I think we'll be at least in that zone, but we're hoping to avoid it by explaining why requiring us to have that additional freeboard doesn't really make a lot of sense in this instance. And the reason it doesn't, in my view, is first, the building is nothing is changing about the elevation of the building. So what's been there for the past 40 years would remain. And so again, I don't think leaving it the way it is works a detriment to the neighbors who have lived it with it the way it is for the past 40 years. So I don't think there's an argument that if we don't raise it, or if we don't do something else to comply with the flood damage reduction code, that it will somehow work a detriment to the neighbors. Secondly, I think that we'd be having a much different discussion if this structure was below the FEMA requirement. When you're below the FEMA requirement, then I think there's a real conversation to be had about you sit in this AE zone and should we move forward and get you above it? FEMA has said 6 is good enough. The town has said we'd like a little bit more. And that's why I'm saying it's a different conversation if you're below the FEMA standard. you're below the FEMA standard, I think you would, the FEMA base elevation, I think you would have concerns about what does this do to our flood insurance rating? You know, because every year the town is audited as to what is the flood insurance rating. And this, if this variance is granted, it certainly will be something that they look at and when they're considering ratings for the town. But I can tell you, in the times that I've done this, I've never seen a variance from a floodplain regulation that exceeds the FEMA regulation work any kind of detriment to the flood insurance rates. So I think that's why this one's a little bit unique. We're already above that base flood elevation that FEMA has set out, but we're not as good as Dewey wants everybody to be. So we're below it. There are a series of considerations.
Hang on one
Sure.
second. David.
If I may, as a practical matter related to these 4 requested variants, which ones actually entail building within or violate making this 7.5 inches below 3? The cabanas and the pool enclosure?
Well, the cabanas actually, again, so the cabanas will be, I guess, at base flood elevation because they're on the first floor. So they will be at 6.4 elevation. So nothing we're constructing goes below 6.4. I mean, the pool, of course, is below it, but the pool isn't structure that's considered for these purposes. So there's nothing new that's going to go any lower than where the building currently exists. Maybe I'm not understanding the question.
Yeah.
Take a shot at it.
I'm trying to get the 50% threshold, trying to get an
Right.
idea of how that.
I see.
So the 50%, I've been researching this for a couple of other projects recently. It's considered what they call substantial improvement under the FEMA code. And it's 50% of the market value of the structure, not including the market value of the land. If your cost of improvements is greater than 50%, there's a requirement to bring the whole project into compliance. I have actually a question on this, which is, I don't know if that same substantial improvement threshold applies to the town regulations. You believe it does? I think that's,
It's in
it's in there the same way it is in FEMA. So that's why we're asking for that.
Right.
I guess I would also just offer that part of the reason why we're likely to be over 50% is because we're trying to do a really nice job with the building and make a really good improvement in the town. You know, the owners are willing to commit significant resources to a significant upgrade, and that's throwing them into this category. But I guess another point I'd say, just to be really clear about it, is the only enclosed, it's about a 28,000 square foot of enclosed building existing. We're about 3,800 square feet proposed new enclosed, including about 3,000 square feet of the pool enclosure and a lobby expansion that's about 600 square feet. I don't know if anyone knows the hotel, but the lobby, quote unquote, now is like one room. It's about 12 feet wide and about 15 feet long. And so we're trying to have a much improved guest experience upon arrival in the lobby, have games, coffee bar, all those kind of things. It's still not going to be huge, but there is a portion of the lobby, which is a very minor percentage of the overall square footage of the building, that would be also proposed to be built at 6.4 because it's all has to be accessible and it's all kind of flows out onto the pool deck and into the existing walkways.
I guess my thoughts on it are, anybody who's lived in Dewey for any amount of time, and I've been here now full time for 11 years, is that when we have a big storm, it's the Bayside that floods. So that's a concern about being below the threshold, is when, because that's, I mean, that's what happens. It's the Bayside that floods. It's not,
Right.
we haven't breached the dunes as long as I've lived here in 11 years with the storm.
Mhm.
But the Bayside
Right.
gets that intake of water. So that's a concern.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's a fair concern. I mean, that's why Dewey took the extra step of going to 12 inches of freeboard. I don't disagree with that. I just suggest that, you know, we are exceeding the FEMA baseline, and to go to a point where we have to elevate the building, this project doesn't happen. You know, so we really want to do something special with the property, but I don't see any way it would effectively occur if this variance isn't granted. So it's an important one to us. 6.4.
It'll go over the bulkhead
Yeah.
and flood up to the bottom floor of your hotel, but I've never seen it go in there.
That's
So, and I don't know if is the bulkhead a city, state? I didn't know if something about adding to the bulkhead might help reduce the flooding coming off of that.
Existing bulkhead is private, but I think
Some of that,
we propose the full deck itself on the new outlook.
Right.
We raise up to about +5.
Right.
Just so that doesn't fade in those kind of.
I mean, your pool that you're going to be putting in will certainly flood if it's like it is, but it's just the pool, right? Yeah.
Another minor
Thank you.
clarification. The cabanas, I don't believe are subject to any flood regulation because they're open structures like a deck that's right on the ground. So the issue of
There is a deck for the cabana though. It's going to extend off the porch.
it's going to extend off the porch. It's not going to be more than 8 inches above grade. It's open structure with no enclosure, and I don't believe is subject to any flood regulations.
David?
Okay, well, just so I've got it clear in my mind. The main reason you're asking for this is because you might run into 50% threshold in terms of the project.
I'd say that's an important reason that we're asking for this. That's right.
You don't have any hard.
Where are we, Jeff, on cost?
I think I would say we're likely to do it. I think they're trying to do a really significant improvement.
Yeah,
The market values are up. I still think we're probably in the
because the issue really is that it's not the valuation of the property, it's the valuation of the structure, and the structure being 40 years old and sort of in the tired, the way it looks now. I mean, it's probably the structure itself is not probably valued as that much. Of course, the land is where the real value is. And the land.
Townsend, I think you've had something.
Just that this question gives rise to this whole concept of where should we be? What posture should we be in at this point? Should the developer have to establish what the costs of the renovations are going to be to the penny before the site plan approval and public hearings and meetings of the planning commission and meetings of the council to grant approval? If it's just an impossible question for them to answer at this point. And then you couple it with the craziness in our economy right now and the increased costs of construction materials. It's an impossible, I'm sure it's impossible to predict with a degree of certainty necessary to answer that question. But what's in the record is that it's likely that they're going to push up against that figure.
And one clarification I'd offer is that if for some reason the pool enclosure is not granted, that would significantly reduce the costs that the owners are committed to putting into the project.
Right.
That would be the pool enclosure
The
on.
pool enclosure that you're considering
Right, right.
not allowed. It might come closer to the 50% threshold.
Right. Right. But presuming the variances are granted and we do everything that's being proposed, it's likely, and I would say probably more than likely that we've hit that threshold.
Sorry, Dawn?
In all of this discussion, when it comes to Bay Resort, we have been having a lot of consultations over this particular project, but there has not been any definitive plans set in and so forth. So we've discussed all these various aspects that could be a problem, might not be a problem, that sort of thing. So to answer the question about the bulkhead, to raise the bulkhead, it may require what's called an H&H study. It's hydrologic and something or other, I can't remember the name of it, to see what kind of impact could that raising of that bulkhead affect other particular properties roundabout, because water is designed to flow wherever it flows. That's what FEMA is actually trying to help us to understand. We can't stop water, but we can build around it and appropriately so that we can live at the water. So with that, that may require a study to see, would any other properties be affected? We haven't even got to that point. Now, when it comes to our particular ordinance, we do have here in Dewey a freeboard, that 12 inches that is required in what's called a special flood hazard area. It's an area of extra measure of safety. The particular hotel, as it sits right this moment, the lowest floor, the top of that slab on the bottom level, has 4 inches to the good from what FEMA does say that particular structure has got to be. Now, when it comes to this improvement and renovation, our ordinance does talk about anytime that there's something called a substantial improvement, renovations, new construction, anything like that, it is required to have a market value appraisal, which we've not gone through that by any means. So to see whether the whole structure must be elevated. Well, right now, they're to the good of 4 inches from FEMA's standpoint, but not to the Dewey Code standpoint. However, what also is something that does need to be taken into consideration is this 12 inches of freeboard is considered an extra measure of safety. It's a higher standard that Dewey went into an agreement with the CRS program, the Community Rating System program. And so the town has been working diligently ever since it became part of the CRS program to be able to have those appropriate standards, those points that this program gives the town for reduced insurance premiums. If those particular premiums are reduced, I don't know. I have no access to that information. It's like a HIPAA law. I can't find out anything of that nature. But if CRS audits our books, which they do once a year for the elevation certificates, and then when they have an audit every 5 years, a much more thorough audit, would they penalize Dewey only in the respect that we're not upholding our ordinance by not granting the reduction of the freeboard 12 inches? Don't know. We attempted, Jim Dede's attempted to contact the CRS, and I see Jim's online, but we've not received any sort of response back from them to say, yes, it would, no, it would not. So that's up in the air. But what does need to be remembered, that if there is an impact, whether it's from this project or anything else, the only ones that would be affected within their premiums would be those that are in what's called the special flood hazard area. That is not the whole town. Those that are in the northern part of the town, they are not required to have mandatory flood insurance. But according to FEMA, those folks are automatically getting the most reduced preferred risk premiums that, let's say, those in the special flood hazard area hope to get by doing, more. So anyway, that is something to take into consideration. We do not know either way how this would or would not affect.
But for perspective on this point, the only additional construction that would be permitted by virtue of granting this variance relates to that pool enclosure. Isn't that right?
And the pool.
And the little lobby. I mean, so this building is already where it is.
Right.
So,
Okay.
so it's, if you grant relief from this ordinance, you're not allowing a new building to be built at that elevation. You're simply allowing that enclosure around that pool and that lobby extension to be granted.
So Fred, I have a question. It says 101 variances for flood. So it's the last provision. It says the Board of Adjustment shall notify in writing any applicant and for building lowest flood elevation, below the base flood elevation. The variance is the floodplain management requirements of the subsection only. Cost of federal flood insurance. Is that applying to the Freeboard or to the FEMA? I read it and I'm not sure what it means.
So you said it was 34?
Yeah, it's provision 3 at the very bottom. 10134.
10134C3, the Board of Adjustment shall notify in writing any applicant to whom a variance is granted for a building or structure with the lowest floor elevation below base flood. So base flood elevation is defined as FEMA, and that's an area, that's an elevation that is lower than the lowest.
We're not the variance.
We're not doing that. Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
They meet the FEMA requirements right now with that slab. The top of that slab is about 4 inches above that.
I should mention, I don't know if I did at the outset, the town has been extremely accessible. We have talked about this project quite a bit, and Don has been helpful. Jim has been helpful. So, I mean, that's what's gotten us here. She's correct that we have not done full building plans yet because it kind of is based upon what occurs before this board.
Anything else before we move on?
Are we still on the Freeboard?
Yeah.
Could you explain number 3 is special exemptions? It's the last paragraph of the Freeboard.
I'm sorry, I don't have the code. Is it in the code?
No, I'm just looking at page 6.
Page 6 of the application. I'm sorry, I don't have the actual application in front of me.
Here, you can.
Yeah, but
Which one again?
And you're looking at,
Top of page 6, the second paragraph says special exemptions. I'm just wondering why that's in there. What's the,
well, special exemptions are something we're going to talk about next. It doesn't relate to the Freeboard. It relates to
it doesn't?
No, it relates to the gazebo and the bulkhead over the elevator.
oh, I'm sorry.
No problem.
My
skip it
mistake.
ahead. Okay. Go ahead.
Are you ready to go to the special exceptions?
Yes.
Okay,
Go
so
ahead.
special exceptions. We've requested 2 special exceptions. And that's a section in the code in section 185-67, talking about certain things that are allowed as special exceptions. And here we're asking for a special exception for the gazebo to be moved to a new location and for the elevator bulkhead structure. So under 185-67, it indicates that certain structures are permitted as special exceptions if the Board of Adjustment finds, and this is the standard you should be applying, if the Board of Adjustment finds that, in its opinion, as a matter of fact, such exceptions will not substantially affect adversely the uses of adjacent and neighboring property. So consequently, if these exceptions that are being requested, if they will not substantially affect adversely, in your opinion, the uses of adjacent and neighboring properties, the special exception should be granted. So first, as to the gazebo, we're requesting that the gazebo be relocated to a location 12 feet into the 18-foot front yard setback. And you can see it on the image that's up now. It's in the sort of middle upper left portion of the property. Again,
And the reason you're calling attention to 185-67 is this subsection C that refers to gazebos and other similar structures.
right, correct.
So it's a different standard than the standard that was applied to the others.
Correct. So I guess the area is adjacent. Am I correct that that's referred to as Sunset Park?
Not at that end.
Not at that end. That land that abuts it, and maybe, Kate, are you able to go to the aerial again? So that land there, if you see where the gazebo is identified, that land is relatively close to the bay. It's not developed right now. I don't know if it is developable or not. The gazebo placement is still quite a distance from any residential structure. So I don't think so. Again, the code provides that if it will not substantially affect adversely the uses of adjacent and neighboring property, then the special exception should be granted. This I submit does not in any way adversely affect adjacent property by moving that gazebo to that area.
Reason we're moving it is to.
Oh, right.
So where it is where. This is a better place.
How far away is it from the pool?
From the pool, the gazebo.
Where it's proposed?
Yeah, it's on the other side of the property.
It's on the other side of the property.
Yes.
It's just aesthetic. I mean, is it just, are you building a brand new one? You're not
Trying to
taking
frame
the
it.
old one and moving it? This would be brand new.
It'd be, I would love to move it if it's facing.
Right, I understand that. But this would
Same size and shape.
Mhm.
But it's, the idea is to frame it to not. To keep
Mhm.
looking from the roots.
Right.
Other questions on the gazebo?
Anyone else?
No.
Okay, go ahead.
So the final special exception that we're requesting is for the elevator bulkhead structure. We're requesting a special exception to permit the elevator bulkhead structure to extend 42 inches above the peak of the roof. That's permissible under the code, under a special exception. And that's section 185-67. This is one that we think makes a lot of sense. And again, the standard here is whether it's going to adversely affect the neighboring properties. And this one being to the interior of the property, located, in an area that won't obstruct any views. This is just one that's a special, it seems appropriate that the special exception should be granted for this under those circumstances.
Just so I know you had the renderings of that elevator area, but and you're expanding the kind of
Main
lobby
entrance,
area,
right.
but that doesn't require you're just going to renovate within that area.
Right.
It doesn't require any
No,
special
that's
exceptions other
correct.
than the elevator shaft having.
That's
Is that
correct.
Okay.
That's correct. And again, it doesn't have an elevator now, trying to become more ADA accessible. It just, it's a design element that's going to enhance the experience for guests. It's allowable under a special exception. This, I think, satisfies the legal standard, should be granted.
Just out of curiosity, what's the height of the rooftop for the property now?
So the existing height is 26 feet 2 inches, which this building is significantly lower than the permissible height limit. I think with the bulkhead structure, it would be 35 feet 6 inches at the tip of that bulkhead structure. Is that right, Jeff?
Okay.
And I guess I would just add that the code for an elevator requires there to be a fixed space elevator. You have to have from the top floor of the elevator 12 feet step there. So part of this is just most of this is just to allow safety measures that are required in order to have an elevator.
Questions? Other questions on the elevator?
Yeah, so again, why is the elevator subject to the special exception test as opposed to a more onerous test, in your opinion?
So my notes have 185-67 allows for a special exception for the elevator bulkhead structure.
Where does it say elevator bulkhead structure?
Don't have the code up in front of me. Let me see if I can find it.
I believe it's just a specific
Table 2.
Oh, it's a note in table 2.
Thank you, Don.
Got it. Okay. So that note is not reciting language in 185-67, but it is in the code nonetheless as a
You're
table.
right. You're right. 185-67 is the general special exceptions section. Mhm.
Okay. That answers my question. Thank you.
Others?
Anything else? Anyone?
So thank you very much for listening so closely and asking really good questions. You've created some questions in my own mind, but I do appreciate the incredible effort that I can tell you've all put into reviewing these materials and getting ready for this evening's hearings. We'd be happy to answer any additional questions you have, or otherwise go to the public and we'll come back to respond if that's appropriate.
That's fine. We're gonna go ahead to public comment. I've got some emails, but I've definitely have people in the public here that I'll take care of first because you actually are here in person versus reading stuff into the record. So whoever wants to go first. You have to come up to the podium, state your name for the record. Mr. Townsend will swear you in. I know it seems very formal, but it's what we have to do.
Yeah, we need to record your comments.
My name is Bonnie Kuklish, and very nervous. I'd like to compliment you. The update looks very nice.
If you'll let
Okay.
Mr. Townsend swear you
So
in.
you said Kukul?
Pardon?
Your last name again, please?
Kuklish.
Kuklish. Okay. And can you give us an address, please?
I live Cajun Cove 2009 Bayard Avenue,
All right.
unit 204.
And if you would pull the microphone a little
little
closer
closer
to
to
you.
you.
Yep, so we can pick you up. So,
That's better.
so, ma'am,
Well,
do you affirm the testimony you give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
nothing but the truth.
Shake your head up and down.
We look at the back of your hotel where the pool will be, you know. And my main concern is we see so many animals. We thought that was wetlands, protected wetlands. There's turtles, birds. We've seen deer, foxes, you name, it's just a place for them. And I haven't heard anything on concern for them where we see it flooding all the time. I kick myself for not taking pictures to show tonight, just this past week or so. Oh, full moon, you guys, that's flooded up on that green, grass area so much. I just think we're not thinking of the animals and the wetland and some of the building where it's going to have the impact. When we moved there, we knew there'd be noise, North Beach and everything. The other animals are just happy to have a place. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Unless anyone has questions for her.
Do you have any questions?
Hi, I'm Chris Phillips, and I also live at Cajun Cove.
Ms. Phillips, do you affirm
no,
the
I'm
testimony you
sorry.
give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So you may proceed.
I'm a full-time resident, and on behalf of our HOA, we talked about side setbacks and front setbacks, but one of my main concerns is the health of the bay, the wetlands, and Sunset Park. So when you're looking at the variances, I hope that part of the consideration is what the impact is going to be. We're already seeing rising tides in the bay, increased flooding. So we're very concerned about. I'll use an example. When we talked about the freeboard, when I first read item number 4, I assume you were talking about what I call a bulkhead almost on the bay. That's what I was thinking of, because water inundates that area all the time whenever we have a storm at the Bay Resort, because it's same things happening at our place. So I just want to say that I would like to see that the bay and the wetlands and the Sunset Park as part of the consideration on any impact where water flow is going to change. Secondary to that, I don't think I heard what size this pool is going to be. But when I look at it, the real estate looks very small to me. So it's hard for me to visualize all these things. What size is the pool?
So relatively small. Well, it varies from about 10 feet wide at one end to about 20 feet wide. It's about 50.
Okay. All right.
It's roughly the same area. You're familiar with that.
So we're probably not able to pick up the cross conversation. So
I'm
if you
sorry.
have thoughts that you want to add, Ms. Phillips, to that relate to the size of
Well,
the pool.
I only asked that question because I wanted to put it in perspective, because some of the renditions, it looks like the pool, the first rendition I saw looked like it stretched the length of the hotel. So I just wanted to get things in perspective, because other residents are concerned about noise coming from this outdoor pool, which historically happens at community pools. And even when your neighbor builds a pool in his backyard and rents it to Airbnbs, it can drive you crazy. So that's noise is a concern. So I'm interested in what the hours are going to be for the pool. And I know that's going to be discussed later, but
Thank you.
so
Anything else?
that's all I've got.
Okay, thank you.
Anything for her?
Any questions for?
Nope.
Oh, I have one more. Thank you, sir.
And then we've got someone in the waiting room.
Yeah, I'll do that next before I read the stuff.
My name's Phil McConchy, 2009 Baird Avenue, Cajun Cove, the adjacent property to where the baby resort is.
Let Mr. Townsend swear you
Yeah,
in.
sir, do you affirm the testimony given in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
And can you just pull the microphone up a little close? Yeah, you're tall
All right.
compared to the last two ladies.
Are we good? Okay. I've just got a couple comments. One is the movement of the cabana from one end to the other. I'm a night owl. I'm out on my deck smoking my cigar at night, turn my TV around, put my headphones on, enjoying life. What it concerns me about moving the cabana to this end, that noise that I don't hear too much on the other end is now going to move to our end where we are, Cajun Cove. And that does concern me. And during the summer months, it's most of the time, there's lots of people out there, the youngsters having fun with their beer and stuff like that. But if they're at the other end where it's really commercial down that way, you don't hear it. But you get closer to the residential end, it does impact. And
Is
plus,
there an image that would be helpful to show that you've seen so far? All right, right there.
Go to the, yeah, there.
Mhm.
here, it is there, it's right over here now.
And where are you?
We are right on the other side of the wetlands. But you can't see, if you go 20 yards, 30 yards, right there.
Okay. But you're outside of the frame of that picture.
Yeah, we're outside of the frame, but I believe, and we've been there for 11 years. The wetlands, I think a good portion of land does belong to Cajun Cove. Yes. It is an adjacent property. It's not vacant, but I mean, it's adjacent. And also the visual part of it, looking down on it and the noise, that's concerned there. And the one other comment I have, and she mentioned about the water levels. We've been here since 2011, or we've been in Cajun Cove. Every year we see the water levels getting higher and higher against our bulkhead. And we do have a major concern there that one is you see more sandy beaches over there where the hotel is now. But if you increase that, a great idea is where's the water going to go? It's going to come right into us. And we had major damage from Sandy, so it can happen. So, other than that, that's two things I have.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
Do anybody have any questions before? No? All right. So let's go ahead and let our Zoom comments in.
You have two.
Okay, thank you.
So let the names purple. Come in first.
Thank you. Okay. Mr. or Miss Koval, can you hear me? Mr. or Miss Koval, can you hear me? We're trying to connect you into the meeting. Okay, we're going to pause with you for a minute. We'll get to the next.
We'll just leave them.
Okay. Okay. Connecting.
Says he's connected.
Mr. Lauer?
There
Yes,
he is.
Hi, you're up for whatever public comment you want to make.
Mr. Lauer, could you give us your address, please?
Yes, I'm here representing Stanton Redevelopment LLC at 244 Lighthouse Cove at 1301 Coastal Highway, Dewey Beach, 19971.
Mr. Lauer?
Mr. Lauer, you affirm the testimony you give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Go ahead, Mr. Lauer. Thank you.
Thank you. I thank Chairman Johnson. I thank the board. Just has some very few comments tonight. I thought the chairman's first opening point that how much there is to digest here was very significant. In fact, my first comment and my final comment is to please, I invite the board, request the board to maintain the public comment period open so that we can further digest the plans and what we've learned here tonight so that we can circle back in a very timely and reasonable amount of time because we have just become more acquainted with this project as a consequence of Mr. Mandalis's presentation. But I will confine myself to 4 or 5 very, very quick comments here for the board to consider in its wisdom as to how they want to proceed with these variances and special requests. The first is the impact to the floor area ratio in RB3 with the following: the pool enclosure, the decking on 3 levels constituting, I think I heard almost 1,000 square feet, and any other components of the project that would be subject to the FAR requirements in the town code. Secondly, I'm not certain that the pool enclosure constitutes an accessory structure, if I understood that correctly. In fact, along those lines, going way back, the board may wish to review the record as to why Mr. Pyrus's proposed enclosure of the Rusty Rudder deck was denied some 5 or 10 years ago. I was in the room at the time, and there were significant concerns with that particular request. Those definitions may still be applicable because I believe we were operating under the new code at that time. Fourth, the new pool, we would request more information on the impact to stormwater management on the western side of the property and its impact to both pervious and impervious surfaces in Dewey Beach. Lastly, apparently, and I'm not exactly sure where the mean high water line is, but apparently a portion of the site is located in state subaqueous lands or is adjacent to state subaqueous lands. The DBE experience has identified the types of leases, public amenities, regulatory protocols, and other town oversight required for those lands that are subject to and adjacent to state subaqueous lands. In fact, Mr. Mandalis is well aware of the public amenities that are most suitable on and adjacent to public state subaqueous lands. The goal of the town's comp plan all along has been to expand public accessibility to our Bayside amenities. Our project was a first step in that regard. I'd like to see others along the Bayside continue the town's commitment there. So let's revisit the town's comp plan to see exactly how aspects of that may be applicable to these requests as well. So lastly, I thank the chair, I thank the board, I thank Mr. Zolper and others, and we would request that you could at least maintain the public comment period for another reasonable amount of time so that we can circle back with further detail. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Just hang on one second. We'll just see if any of the committee members have any questions.
Who do you represent again? If you could do that slowly.
Sure. I'm representing Mr. Hanna at 244 Lighthouse Cove. Stanton Redevelopment LLC is the property owner, and we are located at 1301 Coastal Highway, Dewey Beach Enterprises.
Thank you.
Okay.
Anyone else have any questions, sir? Thank you, sir. We appreciate it.
Well, one
Oh,
quick thing,
sorry,
Mr.
Mr.
Lauer,
Townsend.
I don't, I have some recollection of what you were referring to with respect to some kind of a structure that was to be added to cover a deck at the Rusty Rudder, but I don't think that matter came before the board. That matter was considered, I think, by either the administration or by council, and I kind of think it was just the administration. You have a different recollection?
All I remember, Mr. Townsend, is that it could have been P and Z. You're absolutely correct. I don't think it was administrative. I remember sitting through one or more public hearings, either directly through council or at P and Z. I remember it was in January or February, but it was quite some time back. It was like in the 2010 to 2015 timeframe when the enhancements were made to the public safety improvements along Dickinson Avenue.
And I would say that was before my time, so I can't really speak to that.
Well, it was after 2012, but it was a long time ago. So
I'm just suggesting that the rationale may be applicable in terms of why Mr. Pyrus's request for an enclosure was denied. I'm just requesting that the board consider that.
well, we'll look into it. I think it had to do with use,
Could be.
but more so than the structure. Yeah.
That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, yeah. Well, we've got some more.
Do we have anybody
Let's
else?
see
in the
if we
waiting
can
room?
get Koval back up there.
Oh, he's back. Okay, let's get Mr. Koval, Mr. or Miss Koval back. Connecting.
Looks like they're connected.
Yeah. Hello, Mr. or Miss Koval. Do you have audio? Do you have video?
I don't. I have audio. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. Go ahead. We're gonna have our Mr. Townsend swear you in before you speak.
Name and address for the record, Mr. Koval.
Michael Kowalczyk, 2009 Bayard Avenue, Cajun Cove, Dewey Beach.
Sir,
Owner.
do you affirm the testimony you give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do not.
You do not affirm that your testimony will be the truth?
Sir? Did we lose him again? He might have misunderstood the.
Yeah, I think I started before he finished.
Mr. Kowalczyk? Hello? We've
Yes.
lost you again. Are you there?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Townsend asked if you affirm that it was the truth.
And I said yes.
Oh, okay, we heard no.
Yeah, we
So
heard
we're
it.
just making sure.
No,
So
I'm
you
sorry.
affirm
I think I need to cancel one of these. I have a video session. Yes.
Yes, you have to turn off the YouTube feed, or else you're not going to be able to be timed up with us.
Right,
You can't listen to the YouTube.
because it'll give you feedback. Trust me, I've done that before, mistakenly.
Are you with us?
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Okay, I canceled the YouTube.
Thank you.
Sorry about that, but yeah, what I affirm, I am stating the truth.
okay, thank you. Go forward, thank you.
All right, you may proceed.
I've been a long-term visitor and owner at Dewey Beach for over 30 years, 12 years as an owner at Cajun Cove. And I've represented the Cajun Cove Homeowners Association for 7 years. Many, many years ago, when the flooding was awful throughout Bayard Avenue and particularly around the wetlands, I was part of the team that met with DENREC, the town council, Diane Hansen, et cetera, to get the flooding pumps installed. We were able to generate a grant for that. And we, Cajun Cove homeowners, provided an easement to assist with the drainage of over 20 plus acres of northern Dewey Beach. So I think we've been very good neighbors with regards to the town, the flooding, the cleanup of the wetlands, which we pay for. And I'm just very, very concerned that what's being proposed at Bay Resort, which quite frankly is a motel, it's not a hotel. And it's been there for years. And many visitors like the quaint opportunities that it offers. They've been good neighbors thus far, but I'm very, very concerned that the enhancements that are being proposed and the variances being requested would be counterproductive for both residents and the town itself. So I understand their concern that there may be some, I'm not sure how the lawyer expressed it, but problems with that their loss would be greater than ours, but they are the ones that chose to purchase the motel. So I just want to go on record saying that the adverse consequences to the wetlands, the birds, the osprey, the additional noise, I can't see a reason why the town would approve such a variance.
Thank you, sir. I'm gonna check with the other committee members, see if they have any questions for you. Anyone?
Yes, sir. What exactly what are you opposing? The pool on the exterior pool or the whole renovation itself or?
The variances. I think the regulations were put in there for a purpose. I remember years ago when the town decided to limit motel conversions to condos. There was a reason for that. There's a reason for the elevation for flood control purposes, for insurance purposes. I'm not sure why the town would feel obligated to grant such a variance to a corporation that bought a motel that they knew what the existing regulations were. So I'm not really seeing what the benefit to the town or homeowners is, quite frankly.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else have any questions? Thank you. We appreciate it. No one, everyone's spoken that's in the room, so Kate, we don't have anybody else in the waiting room.
Alert lights this evening. So if
Okay.
anyone comes in before you close.
Okay,
For right now.
thank you. I'm gonna go ahead. I've gotten the town has forwarded me 4 emails from people who are concerned about this and couldn't be here for various reasons. And so I'm gonna read their comments into the record. The first one is from David Moskowitz that said, a previous request of freeboarding adjustment was denied by the Board of Adjustment. Some members of the board are still on the board and the board needs to be consistent. If you're going to allow freeboarding exemption for them, will you allow it for everyone? This will set a precedent which could worsen our community rating, which then raises the cost of flood insurance for every property owner in town. You would also be allowing a 3-story structure, 7 feet and 10-foot yard setbacks. There's no precedent for allowing this. Additionally, the project asks for variances on the bayfront adjacent to Sunset Park. The Center for Inlet Bays is still trying to secure funding for improvements to Sunset Park. Allowing these zoning variances could put the town's ability to secure public funding for improvements to Sunset Park in jeopardy. And thanks, David Moskowitz. The next, Mary Jo Kress from Cajun Cove said, I am against the town variance for Bay Resort. Another from David and Marilyn Campbell. Our family have been owners of a home in Dewey Beach for almost 60 years. Over that span of time, my wife and I have observed numerous changes in our town. And from our perspective, many of them were unfortunate. Most of the detrimental changes over recent decades have occurred when business interests were considered a higher priority than those of longtime residents with a focus on families and the historic character of our community. These previous changes have negatively impacted our quality of life in Dewey. We recently became aware of several variance requests being considered by the Board of Adjustment on 5/16/22 that include allowing a 3-story structure, 7-foot and 10-foot setback without precedent, variances related to the bayfront adjacent to Sunset Park, a 7.5-inch change from the town's 12-inch of freeboard requirement, etc. I understand that approval of these variances could potentially cause increased homeowner costs for flood insurance, a potential reduction in securing revenue increases for Dewey, etc. Given the previously cited potential negative impact on homeowners, my wife and I oppose approval of the variances being considered on 5/16/22. Thank you in advance for bringing these concerns to the attention of the Board of Adjustment in public session before they vote on the variance request. Sincerely, David and Marilyn Campbell. And finally, there were several variances described in the last email to the town. I just wonder why have a code if you let individuals do what they want, regardless of the code, in the form of a variance. It doesn't seem fair to those of us who are compelled to live within the building codes. That is from Lynn Giuliano on 3C Strand Court, number 27 in Dewey Beach. So those are the public comments I've gotten through email, through the town. Nobody else is in there. Okay. So there we are. So if nobody else has anything else, I would like to actually ask our town officials if they have any final comments before I close public comment.
Okay,
Oh,
so you
I'm
want to
sorry.
give them a chance to
Oh,
respond?
yes. Yeah, of course.
Mhm.
Thank you.
I just wanted to respond and clarify to a few of the things that Mr. I think it was Lauer or Lower
Lauer.
said. With regard to FAR, the allowed FAR on this property at 1.2 times the property size is 56,952 square feet. The proposed FAR with the minor additions we're doing is 29,202. So we're significantly below any kind of FAR limit. So I believe that's, and we've reviewed this with Dawn over the last few months. With regard to stormwater management, we are, the regulation is that we have to impact more than 5,000 square feet. Because most of what's being built is built where there's already concrete deck, other than the new pool, we are not exceeding the amount that requires any kind of stormwater management, as far as we understand at this point. With regard to state subaqueous lands, I'm not an expert on this, but I know we're not touching the wetlands. We've reviewed that also pretty carefully with the town building official, and the bulkhead that is existing is kind of between the land that's grass and the land that has subaqueous vegetation and some wetlands, but we're not proposing anything built there. With regard to his comment about the pool being an accessory, so the pool enclosure being an accessory structure, I think that we came and said that I misunderstood that as a possibility at the beginning of the process. We're not applying for it as an accessory structure. That's why we're applying for it as a variance. Glenn may want to address that a little further, but it's not, if there is any relationship to Mr. Hanna's project or the other one he was talking about, it's not because we're considering an accessory structure at all.
Fun to
Add a couple things. I'm always, I believe it or not, I actually enjoy the public comment period because I always learn something that I didn't know before. You know, like I promise you, we don't want to get in the way of any cigar smoking and enjoying seeing stuff. I enjoy a cigar once in a while too. What I would say is that these owners we like them a lot. It's unfortunate they're not here tonight because they would be the first ones to say, okay, we've heard your concerns. Let's talk some more and see what we can do to make sure that they're addressed and we can figure it out. And they commit to that. I've seen it in other projects and they would commit to it here. So I learned some new things. I didn't know there was concerns about wildlife and land preservation and other things. So that's new and something we're going to take to heart and take it back to the owners and have a conversation with you all. In fact, before we leave, let's make sure we exchange numbers and stuff so I can get in touch with you. There was a concern raised about, do we get the size of the pool on the record? Just to be clear, the size of the pool, about 10 feet wide at one end, about 20 feet wide at the other end, and it's about 50 feet long. It's comparable to the existing outdoor pool right now.
I'm sorry, the existing outdoor pool, the outdoor pool, but it's just a different location.
Different
So it's
location.
just- Okay.
Correct.
And it
Correct.
does look like it's kind of an odd shape, so that's why it's
Right.
wider. Okay.
That's
sorry,
right.
Just making sure.
That's right. There was a question raised about, our owner purchased this and now they're asking for variances. Well, if you recall, when I talked about some of the factors that the quick check case enumerates, the Delaware Supreme Court, one of the factors it says is an exceptional practical difficulty is when you're not able to make normal improvements to your property. And these are not, over the hill type improvements. These are improvements that the town and the way it's grown up and become somewhat more sophisticated, it's almost the expectation that projects bring these sorts of enhancements to the town. So these are in line with normal improvements to the property. And that's really what we're trying to do is prove it in a way that's responsible, but also in a way that certainly enhances guest experiences while not impacting the neighborhood in any way. I mean, we're hoping that this actually there's no noticeable impact in the neighborhood.
And Glenn, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but did you, if you did, I missed it when I was, being a lawyer in the room. Did you cite the quick check case in your
Let
letter?
me grab it so you can. It is in the letter. Yes.
Okay, then
Yeah.
I'll find it. I
Okay.
must have overlooked it. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, it's in the footnotes actually.
Okay. Thank you.
What else did I want to mention? There was a comment about expanding public accessibility. Again, these owners are open to those sorts of conversations. If there's something that we can do to enhance the public's view of the bay and our property somehow can work in a way that helps with that, those are conversations we've had with them that they've expressed desire to do those sorts of things. I know that's a comp plan issue about more access and more amenities on the bay side. And again, those are discussions that these owners have welcomed in other projects, and I'm sure they would hear. So I guess in sum, what we're coming here a little bit saying is that, look, this is a deteriorating property. It's a nice property and it offers a unique experience. We can do better and we want to do better. We don't want to do it in a way that is not responsible and in a way that somehow brings an impact to the town that is unintended. So we can either make those improvements that we're asking, these variances to facilitate, or the property, in all likelihood, kind of operates the way it is. And I mean, our owners, I know them, they won't let it deteriorate. They'll do something to keep it nicer than it is now, but it could be so much more. And again, I don't know, the right way to express this, but Dewey Beach has become something special. We think a project like this continues to make it special. We're not trying to do anything that works a disadvantage to the town. If there are any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them, but we respectfully request that you consider these variances and grant them special exception and grant them.
Anyone?
How long have you owned the property? How long have they owned?
They've had it now several months, not a year. Is that right?
There's where I actually hired after they owned it and operated it.
Has it been that long? Okay, about a year and a half.
Dave or Kathy, any questions? Any questions?
Can I ask one more question?
Of course.
Yeah, no, and I was gonna get to Dawn and. I was
And
gonna
you can
get
do
to
that
their-
during the public hearing, and you can also do that during deliberation
Yeah.
phase after. the
Okay.
public-
Go ahead. No, it's okay.
Oh, no.
Go ahead, ask him.
I'm still a little stuck in the front yard. I'm kind of rough, not very good math. If you did allow this would be basically 80% of front yard. Allow that I'm just asking if you know of any other examples where variances granted which would allow front yard and closed structure to be built within 3 feet of the front.
She's not gonna know, she's not gonna have an answer to that question. So, I mean, the underlying principle of your question, I think, is received by the group, understood, noted by the group, but she's not gonna know.
I'm just wondering if there were instances now.
Mhm.
I wasn't aware.
I'll go ahead and take, Jim Didi's, you've been very patient watching through this whole, do you have any comments that you'd like to make? You're on mute, Jim.
You know, we
Still on mute,
sat
Jim.
with Dawn and I and our town manager, Bill, have sat through some of the presentations they gave us. And clearly this will be, at least aesthetically, I believe, an improvement for the town. The variance requests, we've hashed it out with them and we understand it, but we felt that it was something that only the Board of Adjustment could do, and we're not going to be taking a position on that. The accessory building, though, our position, Dawn will probably weigh in on that. We just don't see the pool enclosure as an accessory. We just don't see it. It's not that.
Okay.
Those are my comments.
Thank you, Jim.
So then what is the consequence of you not viewing it as an accessory structure? Jim, if I could ask you
Because
that.
we see the accessory structure, and let's go back to, it's usually a detached storage area. And that's how we have interpreted it. And we've had cases actually before the Board of Adjustment where people have bought sheds and they've applied that as an accessory structure. And that's how the town has looked at it.
Can I respond to that just for a moment? Because I think there's some confusion here. We agree that it's not an accessory structure. That's why we're seeking the variance. We initially thought if it was an accessory structure, it could exist in this area of the setback, but we agree that it's not, and that's why we're here requesting variance.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Anything else, Jim?
No, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Dawn?
Well, that was one thing that I wanted to speak up about also, was that in our discussions, because this enclosure is attached to this hotel structure and building, that increases the floor area. So in essence, it's not an accessory structure, but we've got that all cleared up.
Okay.
Now, when it comes to DENREC, I contacted and talked with DENREC about the beach area, the bulkhead, and so forth along that area, the Bay side area of the hotel. It was just by sheer accident, because I was talking with DENREC about a totally different, separate project. And we talked about that particular area on the Bay Resort. DENREC does not regulate anything that would be on the land side of the mean high tide line. They only regulate anything on the water side or the channel side of the mean high tide line. And so when we were discussing it, I was with DENREC, it appeared that the bulkhead was actually landward. And so that would not be a consideration for DENREC.
Okay.
But that's all subject to the maps that they have.
Okay, which doesn't make it any clearer.
Well, DENREC then has specific maps and so forth, but at the time of my meeting, they did not indicate at all that the bulkhead that they would be considered or concerned about, and we would need approval from DENREC before proceeding.
Mr. Town
Julie.
Manager? Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
Julie, I apologize. I did want, there was a question about the CRS and the change of rates. When I did talk to Scott Bailey, and he's our contact with the community rating system, he had no clue of how this would impact or not impact. He said, and I don't think there is an answer to this until, as Dawn said, we go through a 5-year, we go through the final audit, the big audit that we're going to go through. But there is no answer. He was baffled by the question.
Okay. Thank you, Jim, for adding that.
Well,
Mr. Town Manager, do you have anything to add?
Yep, More Blue Water LLC, which is represented by Mr. Mandelis here today. They've asked for some changes to do this work on this building. That's why it's before you today. Those changes are in the setback areas and on the height, and it's against our current code. So that's why it's here today for you to hear it. We've got Jim, Dawn, myself. We're here to help you answer your questions and help you through this process. And thank you, Mr. Mandela, for your presentation.
Thank you.
So, Fred, do you have anything to add before we close the public meeting?
So by closing the public hearing, we will be closing the record.
Right, we'll just be discussing. Yeah.
Okay. I just want you to be aware that there was at least one request that you leave it open.
Oh, that's right.
Mhm.
Thank you for saying that. I agree. We should probably keep it open because I think, given my comments at the beginning, I'm not sure that we're how everyone feels about being ready to vote. So maybe keeping public comment open.
So if you leave public comment open, then I think it's only fair that you give the applicant an opportunity to respond to anything new that
Of
that
course.
comes in.
No, of course.
I think it also makes it incumbent upon this group to schedule that meeting
Sooner
as soon
rather
as
than later.
possible. And it's also critical if we're not able to dispose of everything tonight, then everyone who is here tonight really needs to be here at the next meeting. So there you have it.
Good food for thought. Thank you for reminding me of all those intricacies that I sometimes forget about. So without closing public comment, do we have discussion from the committee? Dave, do you want to start?
I need a little time.
Okay, and that's why I made my comments at the beginning. I mean, it's a lot of information. It's a lot. I feel like the only thing to me that is easy, none of it's easy, but the only thing to me, in my personal opinion, is easy is the elevator shaft.
Well, we've granted that variance
Before.
Yes, ma'am.
So do we want to talk about that and maybe we can get at least one thing out of the way?
Well, before we start on that, I want to go back to the very beginning when you talked about where's the front side back and where is the side back. And you described that as that the front could be on the bay side. Is that right?
Well, it doesn't really matter. I don't think, because it's talking about a through lot, and then there's a lot that extends from street to street. And I don't know how many of those there are in the town, but this is one.
So you don't consider that an issue as far as where front
I don't think
meets
the
side?
side is the base.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
I just thought we
Okay.
talked about that right at the beginning and
Okay.
I missed it.
So since I brought up the whole elevator issue, should we discuss that? Any discussion about elevator? I mean,
Sure.
we've, like you said, we've granted a variance for elevator shafts before, and I think with a 3-story hotel, I think being ADA compliant is important.
Yes, and it's not going to really affect.
And it's not gonna
anything.
affect anything else. It's not gonna affect the view. It's not, it's a very limited area. So out of the, 7 things that are on this. Kathy, do you have any thoughts on it?
No.
And the other one in that category is the demand. It seems to be minimal issue.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So if anybody has a motion to at least vote on, like we said, we can keep some of these other options open for further comment and reconsideration, but if we can maybe close some of and make our job easier going forward, I'm all about that. So if anybody has any motions with regard to those 2 issues, I'm listening. Yeah, I know you got to go to the right numbers, right?
Right.
make sure we get the wording right.
Special exception one.
Yes.
Yes, I think number 6 is the, number 6 is the elevator being 42 inches above the peak of the roof. So let's do one of them at a time. So let's start with that one. Anyone have a motion with regard to that? Okay, so I'm going to be more specific for
The
Fred's note.
elevator variance allowing 42 inches above the peak.
Thank you.
So
Anybody second?
The second
So-
motion.
Okay, so
Okay.
that's a special exception
Mhm.
as opposed to a variance.
Variance.
So no, that's fine. The only reason I point that out is that the standard for granting one is somewhat less demanding than a variance. The special exception language suggests, as it was pointed out in the table, that so long as there's no significant impact or harm to neighboring properties, that it can be granted more freely than a variance, which requires a showing of exceptional practical difficulty.
Thank you. So I think David has made the motion to approve the special exception for the 42 inches above the peak. Ms. Cherico has seconded. All in favor?
Well, now, hold
Oh,
on,
sorry.
hold on.
Yep.
So we're going to need to create a record on this one
Okay.
as well as the rest.
Sorry.
So, no, it's fine. So we're either going to vote we're going to vote individually. We're either going to precede the vote by indicating why we might be in favor or opposed to this, to give our reasons on the record, or as we vote, we must give our reasons
Okay.
for our vote.
Any specific language that you're looking for that other than the special exception? I feel like I'm missing something now, and I've gotten all befuddled about the differences.
Okay, so how about if we ask the maker of the motion and the seconder of the motion to give justification for the motion?
So, David.
special exception to the exception to permit the elevator bulkhead structures. With this, we can help the hotel become ADA compliant and minimal exception to the height restriction. In fact, the roof of the peak of the roof.
Sure.
Ms. Cherico, do you
I can't-
second that amount?
Can I agree with him?
Yes, you can.
I would agree with him.
Okay. So we'll just
So we'll do a roll call.
roll call. with-
And, please offer your justifications for your vote as you make your vote.
So we've heard, so obviously you're in favor, Mr. Shuey,
For the reasons
for the reasons
stated.
you already stated.
Mhm. Mhm.
I'm in favor for the reasons he stated.
I am also in favor for the reasons stated. I feel like if anything, it's a benefit to have the ADA compliance with the elevator for the hotel.
I agree with him
For the reasons
for
stated.
the reasons stated.
Thank you.
Okay, so you can declare that
So
special exception has been
that
granted.
special exception has passed. Going forward. The other thing that Mr. Shuey mentioned was, which number is that? Is the gazebo? Variance 3. The cabana. That's the request for variance pursuant to Chapter 185-66 and 185 Table 2 of the Code of Town of Dewey Beach to obtain a front yard setback variance to permit the cabana to extend. Wait, was it the cabana or the
No,
gazebo?
it's the gazebo.
I thought it was the gazebo. Yeah, I thought
Yeah.
thought you had mentioned the
Talking
gazebo. The
gazebo.
cabana is different from the gazebo.
Right.
Moving just the gazebo to the other side of. Oh, here it is, number 5.
Is this in the applicant's letter?
Yeah, I'm
Number
looking
5?
at, yes, I'm looking at, well, I'm actually looking at our agenda.
Okay.
This is number 5. consideration for a request for special exception pursuant to 185-66 and 185-67C to relocate the existing gazebo to a location 12 feet into the 18-foot front yard setback on the property located at 126 Bellevue Street. So do we have any more comments about that and what before we have a motion, or can we discuss that further? What your thoughts are, David, since you're the one who brought it up?
As I understand it, the existing property already intrudes 6 feet into the. This is an additional 6 feet beyond that, but it's still 6 feet from the front. This is the gazebo. I would support it as an amenity that intrusive and is not. I've heard from the neighbors who hear that they might be noise from that. So I mean, in that sense, that was my thinking.
Any other comments?
I think we should think about it.
Is that side, is it going to have some type of fencing that would block some of that noise from the gazebo?
Okay, well, maybe we're not quite ready to, until we make sure everybody has all the information. So are there any other thoughts to any of these other variances as far as voting tonight, or do we feel like there's need for more public comment and our consideration, because it is a lot of information to digest as we talked about earlier? Yes. Rick?
Yes.
Yes, you agree? Okay. So based on that, I will keep the floor open for public comment for anyone else who wants to make comments with regard to these remaining issues. Obviously, we've cleared up one. Sorry, only 1 out of 7. But give us more time to ponder now that we've gotten the information, we've gotten the extent of what the project is going to look like and what we've heard from the community, or at least some of the community, about the project and their concerns. It'll give and at least as long as I've been on the board, we haven't done this before, but I feel like there is so much information to digest. It would behoove us to not take some more time for consideration. Can we look at our calendars to go ahead and schedule another meeting so that we do this sooner rather than later? I mean, I know we're all very busy, but as Mr. Townsend pointed out, we should all be here for a meeting to vote on this based on this. So I want to make sure that we're all available. I would say, let's see, 2 Mondays is Memorial Day, so we don't want to do that. 3 Mondays from now is Monday, June 6th at 6 o'clock. Does that work?
I have no way of knowing.
You have no way of knowing.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
because my wife's
Oh, that's right. That's right.
having surgery and
That's
we're
right.
not sure. when
But
that's
you
gonna-
can come in by Zoom.
I can come in by Zoom if it's not
Right,
at the same
at
day.
the same exact
Right.
day.
Yeah, so it's something I cannot.
Okay, let's, Kathy,
I'm okay.
you're okay? David? June 6th, okay. So let's go ahead and tentatively
You wanna
set.
ask the app?
Oh, I'm sorry, the applicant. Yes, I should ask them because they have to be here too. Monday, June 6th? Okay, so we'll go ahead and set Monday, June 6th at 6 o'clock as a tentative meeting to, and if something comes up, we'll obviously inform the applicant as soon as possible if it needs to be moved. But in the meantime, I would encourage any other public comment in the meantime. Well, I don't think, can I cut off comments without doing it in a public meeting?
I think you could set ground rules that any any comments you're to receive
Okay.
must be received by
So I would say a week,
Friday or
the
something.
Friday, well, yeah, the Friday before the meeting, which would be the,
Or an earlier date.
yeah, actually, let me do a week out to give the board members plenty of time. I know my schedule's completely insane, so that would be Memorial Day, Monday. Let's do it Tuesday since it's not a holiday. Let's do Tuesday, May 31st at 5 o'clock will be the close of any public comments to be determined for our vote on, or our meeting on the 6th of June. Does that work, Fred? Okay. So on that note, I thank everyone. It's, this is one of the longest meetings we've had in a really long time. So I appreciate, no, it's okay. It's like I said at the beginning, it's a lot of information to digest and we want to make sure we get it right. We want to make sure we have, the comments from the public as well as making sure that the members can digest and understand exactly what we're looking to do or not do. And so I appreciate everybody's time and attention. And on that, do I have anything else to do before I ask for a motion to adjourn? Okay. Motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Thank you. Second.
No, I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate your time.